Sure. Here's an even more detailed and engaging expansion of your introduction for the video on Nosferatu, 2024. 1. Introduction ***. Friends, horror lovers, and cinema enthusiasts, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm thrilled to talk about a film that has already started creating a chilling stir in the world of cinema. If you love atmospheric horror, gothic storytelling, and haunting visuals that stay with you long after the credits roll, then this is the movie you've been waiting for. Yes, I'm talking about Nosferatu 2024, a film that brings one of the most iconic and terrifying figures in cinematic history back to life for a whole new generation. Now, before we dive into the dark shadows and mysterious corridors of this film, make sure to hit that like button if you're planning to watch Nosferatu in English. And if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss updates on the latest movies, reviews, and behind-the-scenes stories. In today's video, we're going on a deep dive into everything you need to know about Nosferatu 2024. What the film is about, the eerie atmosphere it creates, where and how you can watch it, the story behind it, and what makes this version so unique compared to the original and other adaptations. Whether you're curious about its streaming release, planning to catch it in theaters, or waiting for its satellite TV debut, I'll be giving you all the details about the platforms, release timelines, and how you can experience the terror from wherever you are. But that's just the beginning. We're also going to look behind the scenes and talk about the film's technical brilliance. From its beautifully haunting cinematography to its masterful direction, set design, and costume work, this movie has been carefully crafted to immerse you in a nightmarish, gothic world. You'll feel like you've stepped into a dark painting, one that comes to life in the most terrifying way. We'll also break down the sound design and music score, which plays a huge role in delivering the tension, dread, and emotional weight of this story. Next, we'll explore the full production timeline, how the idea for this remake came about, the planning that went into pre-production, the choices made during filming, and how all the pieces came together during post-production to deliver a final product that is as polished as it is unsettling. We'll also talk numbers. What was the budget for this film? What were the expectations for its box office performance? Is it shaping up to be a hit? Or is it flying under the radar as a hidden gem of the horror genre? Then we'll turn to the heart of the movie, the storyline and characters. I'll give you a spoiler-free summary of the plot, share a short but thoughtful review of how the narrative unfolds, and highlight the themes that make Nosferatu more than just a vampire tale. It's about obsession, fear, love, corruption, and the terrifying unknown. And of course, we'll talk about the star cast, who's playing Count Orlok, who the supporting characters are, and how well each actor has embraced their role. You'll find out who stood out, which performances sent chills down the spine, and how the casting choices elevate the story. But wait, that's not all. We're also going to look at the facts and trivia, those fascinating bits of information that true fans love. You'll learn about the inspirations behind the film, any connections to the original 1922 Nosferatu, how this remake honors the legacy of the silent horror classic while putting a modern, cinematic twist on it. We'll talk about the director's vision, how the makeup and visual effects team worked to create such a disturbing look for Count Orlok, and what early critics and fans are saying about the movie. So friends, I genuinely request you to stay with me until the very end of this video. Whether you're here for the chills, the filmmaking insights, the performance reviews, or just want to know whether this movie is worth your time, you'll find everything right here. I promise, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why Nosferatu 2024 is one of the most talked about horror releases of the year, and why it just might keep you up at night. So, without wasting any more time, let's step into the darkness and begin the journey into the terrifying world of Nosferatu. Let's start the video. Would you like help drafting the next section of the video, like the plot summary or cast breakdown? 2. Plot and narrative. Alright friends, now let's dive into the dark and twisted world of Nosferatu 2024. A story that doesn't just creep up on you, it seeps into your bones like cold fog rolling over an abandoned village. From the very first scene, the film grabs you by the collar and whispers, this won't be a normal night. And it's right. It's not. The story begins in the late 19th century, soaked in fog and superstition, where we follow a young woman named Ellen who lives in a remote European town, isolated by mountains, forests, and the chilling presence of something that doesn't belong in the world of the living. This version of the tale doesn't just dust off the old story and retell it beat by beat. No, this film plays with time and mood like a conductor leading an orchestra of dread. While the bones of the narrative follow a familiar arc, an innocent protagonist, a mysterious outsider, a descent into terror, the flesh of it is rich with layered perspectives, visual symbolism, and psychological nuance. The movie slips in and out of timelines and lets the past bleed into the present. It's like watching a ghost remember its own story. It all kicks off when Ellen's fiancé, Thomas, an estate agent, is summoned to a distant castle deep in the Carpathian Mountains. He's been tasked with finalizing a property deal with a reclusive nobleman known only as Count Orlok. Sounds simple enough, right? But here's where things start to rot from the inside. From the moment Thomas steps inside the castle, reality begins to unravel. The environment itself feels alive. Walls seem to breathe, shadows linger longer than they should, and Orlok doesn't blink. He doesn't even pretend to be human. His every movement feels like a nightmare trying to imitate life. Time stretches unnaturally here, and the film leans into it. You don't know how long Thomas has been inside, and neither does he. Days feel like weeks, and dreams bleed into waking life. Meanwhile, back in Ellen's town, strange things begin to happen. People fall sick. Animals flee. The light doesn't feel warm anymore. The town's priest starts hearing whispers in the chapel, and Ellen begins experiencing haunting visions. Visions that suggest she has a deeper connection to the Count than anyone realizes. Is it a curse? A reincarnation? A prophecy? The film never gives you clean answers, and that's part of its magic. It lets the horror live in the gaps, in the unanswered questions, and in the slow realization that this isn't just a story about a vampire. It's about fate, obsession, and the price of looking too long into the dark. And, the turning points. There's a chilling moment when Ellen finds a journal belonging to a long-dead woman who describes dreams identical to her own. A scene where Orlok visits the town not through streets, but through dreams and nightmares. His presence felt before he ever arrives. And when he does arrive, it's not with a bang, but with a suffocating silence that spreads like a plague. The town doesn't scream. It decays. Ellen's descent is the emotional spine of the film. As she starts to unravel the truth, she becomes both terrified and drawn to it. Her connection to Orlok is never simple. There's no clear line between victim and chosen. And that's where the narrative really twists the knife. It toys with the idea of destiny. Did she bring him here? Has this happened before? Is this a cycle doomed to repeat? The climax doesn't erupt. It tightens like a noose. It's not about high-speed chases or explosive confrontations. It's about silence, sacrifice, and surrender. The final moments are bathed in shadow and soundless sorrow. You watch it not with your eyes wide, but with your breath held, because the film refuses to give you the comfort of catharsis. So no, this isn't your straightforward good versus evil story. This is Gothic horror at its most poetic. It's a slow, creeping descent into something ancient, primal, and inevitable. The film doesn't just show horror, it lures you into it, traps you there, and makes you question whether you ever really left. Would you like to move on to the cast and characters next? 3. Character development. Let's talk about the dark, the disturbed, and the deeply human characters of Nosferatu 2024. Because this film doesn't just rely on jump scares or creepy visuals to spook you. No, it digs deeper. It builds its horror around people, their fears, their desires, and the twisted places their hearts can take them. Every major character in this film is not just a role. They're a layered, beating part of a dying world, and watching them evolve or unravel is one of the most disturbing pleasures of this story. Let's begin with Ellen. Oh, Ellen. On the surface, she starts out as the classic Gothic heroine, graceful, gentle, a little too curious for her own good. But as the story unfolds, she becomes so much more than that. Ellen doesn't just react to the darkness. She absorbs it, wrestles with it, and ultimately walks into it with her eyes wide open. She's not a damsel in distress. She's the emotional engine of the entire film. Her journey is filled with contradictions, fear and fascination, innocence and intuition, despair and defiance. She begins the story as a woman caught in a quiet life, but you slowly realize she's carrying something ancient, something that may have always been a part of her. Her dreams are prophetic. Her connection to Orlok is spiritual, maybe even supernatural. And as the tension escalates, so does her inner strength. She's not just resisting evil. She's confronting a cosmic pull that wants to claim her completely. Now, let's talk about Thomas, her fiancé. Poor, loyal, clueless Thomas. He's not the typical heroic lead, and that's what makes his arc so tragic. When he's sent off to deal with the Count, he's full of youthful confidence and ambition. But the deeper he goes into Orlok's world, the more he starts to break down. What begins as a business trip turns into a spiritual collapse. His scenes in the castle feel like a descent into a personal purgatory, and by the time he makes it back, if he even really does, he's a shadow of the man he once was. His transformation isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, hollow, and it leaves you wondering if anyone who enters Orlok's world ever really comes back whole. And then there's Count Orlok himself, the vampire, the curse, the walking nightmare. But don't expect a typical villain with sharp one-liners and flashy entrances. Orlok is something older than evil. He doesn't talk much, and when he does, it feels like the room temperature drops 10 degrees. But make no mistake, he's not just a monster hiding in the dark. This version of Orlok is patient, calculating, and disturbingly aware. He doesn't need to chase victims, he draws them to him. And what's chilling is that you begin to sense that he's more than just a creature of hunger. He's tied to Ellen, possibly through fate, possibly through something far stranger. There's a haunted intelligence in his eyes, as if he remembers every life he's taken, and everyone he's still waiting for. Their relationship, Ellen and Orlok, is the eerie heart of the film. It's not romantic, but it's intimate. It's not love, but it's obsession. It plays out like a hypnotic dance between predator and prey, but it's never that simple. You start to wonder who's really in control. Ellen sees Orlok in her dreams before she ever meets him. He seems to know her long before she becomes aware of him. There's a twisted magnetism that links them, and their connection reshapes everything around them: Thomas, the town, the world. Everyone else becomes part of the fallout of their strange, inevitable bond. Even the minor characters are painted in rich, eerie tones. The town priest, who starts off firm in his beliefs, slowly begins to unravel as the spiritual forces he thought he understood begin to mock him. The innkeeper, full of nervous energy, knows more than he says, but fear keeps his lips sealed. The old woman who speaks in riddles isn't just a creepy background character. She holds a key to the past, dropping hints about cycles and sacrifices that have repeated for generations. No one in this story is untouched. Every character seems to carry a shadow just behind them, and the deeper we go, the more those shadows start to speak. There's no clean character arc where people grow into better versions of themselves. Instead, they're transformed, sometimes corrupted, sometimes awakened, sometimes completely undone. Relationships bend under the weight of fear. Love turns into obsession. Faith crumbles into doubt, and identity itself becomes something slippery and unreliable. So while the fog, the fangs, and the fear will grab your attention, it's the people, the broken, haunted, fascinating people, that truly make Nosferatu 2024 a film you can't stop thinking about. Would you like to explore the visual style and atmosphere next? 4. Performances. Let's talk about the performances in Nosferatu 2024, because this film isn't just powered by shadows, castles, and blood-curdling sound design. No, this beast breathes because of its actors. These performers don't just act haunted, they're haunted. And every glance, whisper, and trembling breath pulls you deeper into their nightmare. Let's start with Ellen, played with unnerving grace and simmering intensity by the lead actress. She doesn't just carry the emotional weight of the film, she drags it behind her like a heavy cloak soaked in dread. From the first moment you see her on screen, you get the sense that she's tethered to something beyond comprehension. Her performance is all about restraint. She says little, but her eyes, they speak volumes. They're filled with sadness, curiosity, and something almost supernatural. You can see her unravel slowly, moment by moment, like a candle melting under its own flame. And when she starts experiencing those strange, prophetic dreams, she doesn't play it like a typical scream queen. No hysteria, no melodrama. Instead, she leans into the madness with a calm resolve that makes everything 10 times more chilling. There's a scene, no spoilers, where she simply stares out a window, and I swear it's one of the scariest moments in the film. Not because of what she sees, but because of what she knows. Then we have Thomas, our well-meaning, increasingly broken fiancé. The actor here does something deceptively difficult. He plays a man whose confidence slowly, painfully dissolves into helplessness. Early on, he's charming, a little arrogant, eager to impress. But as soon as he enters the orbit of Count Orlok, his performance shifts. It's subtle at first. He stammers a bit more. His hands shake when they shouldn't. His posture shrinks ever so slightly. But by the time he returns home, or thinks he's returned home, he's a completely different man. There's one scene where he tries to explain what happened to him, and you can see in his eyes that he doesn't even fully understand it himself. That kind of psychological collapse is tough to pull off, but he nails it. And now we get to the main event, Count Orlok. The actor playing this ancient, cursed vampire gives a performance that is absolutely hypnotic. He doesn't need elaborate dialogue or flashy effects. His entire body is a special effect. Every movement is calculated, every step deliberate, every tilt of the head full of menace. He moves like he's not quite part of this world, like his body is being controlled by some decaying puppet master from the beyond. His voice, when he chooses to use it, is low and slow and full of ancient sorrow. He doesn't scream. He doesn't roar. He simply exists, and that's terrifying enough. There's a moment where he locks eyes with Ellen from across a room, and the camera just lingers. Nothing is said, but in that moment, you believe everything. That he's known her for centuries, that he's waited for her, and that something irreversible is about to happen. That's not just acting. That's possession. The supporting cast also brings their A-game. The town priest, trembling with repressed terror. He starts off confident in his faith, but the actor lets it all crumble slowly, like a man trying to hold on to a rope that's already on fire. There's a scene where he recites scripture, and you can tell he's not doing it for protection. He's doing it because it's the only thing keeping him from losing his mind. The innkeeper, played with a twitchy, suspicious energy, provides a few moments of nervous tension and grim foreshadowing. Every side character feels like they've lived through this horror before. Even when they're on screen for just a minute or two, they leave an impression. They're tired, they're scared, and they know more than they'll ever say. What makes these performances so powerful isn't just what's said, it's what's not. This is a film of silences, of looks held too long, of hands twitching just before a scream. It's physical acting in its purest form. Everyone moves like they're carrying a weight the audience can't see. And somehow, that makes it feel all the heavier. So while Nosferatu 2024 may be drenched in atmosphere and dripping with dread, it's the cast, their eyes, their breath, their very bones, that make you believe in the nightmare. Want to move on to the visuals and atmosphere next? There's a lot to say about the way this movie looks and feels. 5. Direction. Let's talk about the master behind the madness. The director of Nosferatu 2024, the one pulling the strings in this eerie puppet show of fog, fear, and fatal attraction. Because make no mistake, this film doesn't stumble into brilliance by accident. It's carefully, hauntingly constructed, and every frame, every lingering silence, every shadow stretching just a little too far is part of a grand design orchestrated by a filmmaker with a very specific vision. The tone of this film isn't just gothic, it's suffocatingly gothic. It wraps around you like velvet soaked in wine and grave dirt. And that's all the director's doing. He doesn't just set the mood, he drags you into it, builds a world where even the air seems to hum with ancient sorrow. From the first minute, you feel like you're trapped in a dream, one that's beautiful, slow, and slightly off balance, like the floor might give out beneath you at any moment. The pacing? That's where things get really interesting. This film doesn't rush. Oh no, it glides. It creeps. It lets scenes breathe, and not just for atmosphere, but for tension. The director understands that true horror isn't in what jumps out at you. It's in what lingers just off-screen. So instead of throwing scare after scare, the film lets dread simmer slowly, until you're squirming without even realizing why. There are long stretches of silence, carefully measured pauses between lines, shots that last a beat longer than your comfort zone allows. It's hypnotic. You find yourself leaning in closer to the screen, as if you're about to uncover some forbidden truth. That's no accident. That's orchestration. Now, let's talk about the visual language of the film. The director treats each frame like a painting. Scratch that, like a cursed oil painting found in a crumbling castle. Every composition is soaked in detail. Light and shadow are used like characters themselves. There are shots where a single candle lights the entire room, and the rest of the screen falls into inky blackness. You're constantly aware of what you can't see, and that uncertainty is where the fear grows. The director also uses symmetry to unsettling effect. Perfectly balanced compositions that feel too perfect. And then, just when you've settled into that eerie harmony, he breaks it with a jolt. A face appears in the corner, a window creaks open. A movement catches your eye in the background. You're never safe. One of the boldest choices the director makes is his refusal to rely on traditional exposition. You don't get long speeches explaining the vampire myth or the town's history. Instead, he trusts the audience to pick up on the clues. An old book half-burned, a portrait covered with a cloth, a single line muttered in a dream. The world-building happens through texture and implication. It's storytelling by shadow and suggestion, and it works because the director knows exactly how much to show and how much to withhold. It's like he's daring you to fill in the blanks, and in doing so, you create the most terrifying version in your own mind. Another masterstroke is how he directs the characters within the frame. There's a constant push and pull between stillness and movement. Orlok, for instance, rarely walks into a scene. He glides into it. Ellen often stands motionless while the world spins around her. Thomas stumbles, twitches, his eyes darting like he's being hunted by things we never see. The blocking is precise, almost ritualistic. It's as if every gesture, every footstep is part of an ancient ceremony being reenacted in real time. And then there are the transitions. Oh, the transitions. This director loves to blur the line between reality and nightmare. Scenes bleed into each other with ghostly dissolves. Windows become mirrors. Time slips sideways. There are moments when you're not sure if you're watching a flashback, a dream, or something that hasn't happened yet. But it doesn't matter because in this world, everything is connected by mood, not chronology. The director wants you to feel your way through the story, not think your way through it. And the result is immersive, disorienting, and completely hypnotic. Ultimately, what makes the direction so gripping is that it doesn't scream for your attention. It whispers. It seduces. It plants unease deep in your chest and lets it grow there unseen. Every stylistic decision, the long takes, the slow zooms, the deliberate silence, is a thread in the larger tapestry of dread. This isn't just a horror film. It's a spell. And the director? He's the warlock casting it. Want to go next into the cinematography and visual aesthetics? That part's a feast for the eyes, if you can handle it. 6. Cinematography. Let's enter the haunted cathedral that is Nosferatu, 2024. through the eyes of the camera, because in this film, the cinematography isn't just a tool, it's a language. A cold, whispering language that tells you everything the characters won't say out loud. The camera here doesn't just watch the action. It prowls, it lurks, it caresses the decay. It's as if the lens itself is possessed, compelled to show us not just what's happening, but what's hiding beneath the surface. Right from the start, you notice something's different. The opening shot isn't a typical wide establishing scene. No, it's a slow, creeping push-in on a rotting wooden door, trembling ever so slightly in the wind. The camera doesn't care about setting the scene in a practical sense. It wants to set a mood. And that becomes the blueprint for the entire film. We don't just move through rooms. We drift like ghosts. The tracking shots are silky, unnervingly smooth, gliding down long hallways and winding staircases as though we're being led by some unseen hand. And that's exactly the point. The cinematography wants us to feel like intruders, or maybe even invited guests in a place we don't fully understand. Lighting is a whole different story, a character of its own. The cinematographer paints with shadow more than light. There are entire sequences lit by candlelight, where the flickering flame casts long, quivering silhouettes on the walls that seem to move even when the actors don't. The darkness in this film isn't just absence, it's presence. It has texture, weight, and menace. Characters are often half submerged in it, like they're slowly being swallowed. Orlok's castle, in particular, is a masterpiece of shadowy geometry. Harsh angles, warped corridors, and staircases that vanish into pitch-black voids. There's one unforgettable shot. Orlok silhouetted at the top of a staircase, the only light coming from below, his figure stretched and twisted like some nightmare shadow puppet. You don't just see him, you feel his shape burn into your memory. Framing is done with near-surgical precision. The cinematographer frequently isolates characters within the frame, using doorways, arches, and windows to trap them visually. Ellen is often framed in mirrors or seen through gauzy curtains, adding a dreamlike filter to her reality. Thomas, in contrast, is boxed in by architecture, tight, suffocating spaces that make the frame feel like it's closing in on him as the story progresses. Orlok is almost never centered. He emerges from the edge, the background, the periphery of your vision. You catch him at the corner of the frame, and then, bam, he's there, right in the middle, like a cold breath on the back of your neck. One of the most striking visual techniques is the way the camera plays with symmetry and then breaks it. You'll get a perfect, balanced composition, a shot so symmetrical it almost looks holy. And then something shifts. A door creaks, open slightly. A figure enters from an angle. A reflection doesn't quite match the movement it should. These tiny ruptures in the visual order make you hyper-aware, almost paranoid. The frame is never just a frame. It's a trap, a trick, a whisper that something is not quite right. There are also moments of sheer visual poetry. A shot of Ellen walking through fog-covered woods, her white dress almost glowing, her face unreadable. Or a quiet scene at dawn where Orlok's shadow stretches impossibly long across cobblestones, trailing behind him like a memory of death. There's even a dream sequence where time seems to dissolve entirely. The film shifts to slow motion, colors bleach out, and the world bends like melting glass. The cinematography here doesn't just support the story, it becomes the story. It shows you what words cannot, what logic resists. And let's not forget the stillness. The camera often locks off, letting a single, unmoving frame hang in the air for longer than you expect. You start scanning the image. Is something going to move? Is something already there? It turns you, the viewer, into a paranoid observer. You're no longer passive. You're searching the darkness for answers you may not want to find. That tension, that creeping anxiety is all in the visual grammar. Every frame dares you to look deeper. In Nosferatu 2024, cinematography isn't there to show off, it's there to haunt. It's not flashy, but it's unforgettable. This isn't just a film you watch. It's a series of nightmares you remember in fragments, all stitched together by a camera that knows exactly where to point your eyes, and where to let your imagination do the rest. Want to keep going with the sound design and score? That's where the film starts whispering directly into your ear. 7. Editing and pacing. Now, let's talk about the heartbeat of Nosferatu 2024. It's editing and pacing, because this isn't your standard quick-cut, adrenaline-drenched horror flick. No, this film doesn't sprint, it slithers. It doesn't rush toward terror. It lets it creep up behind you, tap you on the shoulder, and then vanish before you can turn around. And all of that is crafted through some truly masterful editing that understands one key rule. Dread is a slow-burn dish best served with patience and precision. Right from the first few minutes, you realize that this film is operating on its own clock. The opening scenes unfold like a trance. The edits are long, meditative, deliberate. There are wide shots that hold just a few seconds longer than you expect, letting tension coil around the frame like smoke. There are lingering silences between lines of dialogue, gaps so wide they feel like the movie is daring you to speak just to break them. But you don't. You sit in it. You marinate in the discomfort. The editor knows that horror isn't always about speed, it's about space. Space to breathe. Space to wonder. Space to dread what might happen next. And the transitions, they are eerie little pieces of poetry. We're not talking simple cuts or jarring jumps. We're talking about slow fades, dissolves, and scene-to-scene echoes that create this eerie sense of continuity, as if the entire film is one long nightmare without hard edges. Sometimes the end of one shot will mirror the beginning of the next. A window in the castle becomes a hallway in the village. A shadow in one scene matches the shape of a tree in the next. This visual continuity gives the film an almost hypnotic rhythm, where time doesn't move in a straight line, but in a slow, spiraling descent. You're not moving from moment to moment. You're sinking. Now, when it comes to pacing, the film takes bold risks. It doesn't spoon-feed thrills or speed toward scares. There are long stretches where nothing happens in the traditional sense, but that's exactly the point. These are the scenes where your nerves get frayed. Your imagination starts doing the heavy lifting. You begin questioning every creak of the floorboards, every figure in the background. And just when you've almost convinced yourself you're safe, the film strikes. Not with chaos, but with a sudden, quiet intensity that hits even harder because you've been lulled into a false calm. There's a particular section in the middle, when Thomas first arrives at Orlok's castle. That plays almost like a silent film. Minimal dialogue, sparse movement, just atmosphere, suggestion, and a growing sense of unease. And yet the editing keeps you locked in, because even though the tempo is slow, there's always a purpose behind the rhythm. Every slow pan, every breath between cuts, builds toward a payoff. When the scares do arrive, they're not cheap, they're earned. The pacing softens you, disorients you, and then strikes with surgical precision. Montage sequences, though rare, are beautifully executed. Dreams blur into memories, hallucinations melt into waking life, and you're never entirely sure what's real. One standout sequence blends Ellen's dreams with Thomas's experiences in the castle, the editing flipping back and forth in increasingly shorter bursts. The rhythm tightens. The transitions quicken. What began as two separate stories starts to feel like one shared nightmare. That emotional crescendo that comes from editing that knows exactly when to ramp up and when to hold still. Even the placement of scenes shows serious editorial instinct. The film uses juxtaposition to brilliant effect. A quiet moment of domestic normalcy in the village is followed by a silent, brooding shot of Orlok watching from his window. A child playing in a sunlit courtyard is abruptly cut with the image of a pale hand resting on a coffin lid. These contrasts aren't accidental, they're tension bombs. And every time the pace picks up, you feel it in your gut because the slow build made you forget how fast things can get. So while the pace might feel glacial to those used to jump scare horror, here it's a strength. The film doesn't race, it seduces. The editing gives you just enough to stay one step behind the terror, never ahead of it. And by the time it starts to speed up in the final act, you're already too deep, too far gone. The rhythm of the cuts becomes breathless, frantic, like the film itself is trying to escape what it's created, but it can't. And neither can you. Ready to dive into sound design and score next? That's where this nightmare really starts to sing, or should I say Hoult. 8. Soundtrack and score. If the visuals in Nosferatu 2024 are what you see in your nightmares, the score is what you hear when you wake up in a cold sweat, unsure if you're still dreaming. The soundtrack doesn't just accompany the movie, it possesses it. It's the fog rolling through empty streets, the echo in the castle halls, the creaking floorboard when no one's there. From the very first note, it sinks its claws into the atmosphere, and it never lets go. You don't listen to this score, you absorb it. It seeps into your bones. Let's talk tone. The music here isn't traditionally melodic. You won't be humming themes on your way home. This is a score built from unease. It's full of long, sustained strings that shiver just below the threshold of comfort. There are distorted tones, sub-bass hums that sound like ancient tombs shifting underground, and sudden orchestral stabs that jolt you like someone slamming a crypt shut. And then, just when you're waiting for the usual swell, it cuts out. Silence. Pure, horrifying silence. And that silence, it's deafening. It's loaded. It makes your pulse louder in your own ears. The composers know exactly when to go quiet, and that quiet isn't restful, it's weaponized. You sit there holding your breath because you know something's coming. But when the music does swell, it's like a requiem for your sanity. There are moments, especially during Ellen's dream sequences, where the score blooms into these mournful, almost religious chorales. Human voices, layered and distorted, floating like echoes from some forgotten cathedral. The music in those moments isn't just eerie, it's tragically beautiful. It doesn't just scare you, it hurts. It draws out that strange emotion horror so rarely touches, sorrow. This isn't just a soundtrack for terror, it's a symphony of loss. And the fact that the film can flip between dread and mourning without missing a beat is a testament to how carefully composed this score is. Then there are the motifs. Oh yes, they're there, quiet at first, like ghosts in the mix, but they grow. There's a recurring sound, a kind of atonal lullaby, played on what sounds like a warped music box that follows Orlok like a shadow. It pops up in strange places, sometimes barely audible, sometimes right up in your face, but always twisted. It makes you feel like you're being watched. Like the vampire isn't just in the room, he's in the sound. Ellen has her own recurring theme too. A sorrowful 3-note piano phrase, simple and stark. Every time it plays, you feel her slipping further away from reality. The music builds characters just as much as their performances do. Let's not forget how the score blends with the sound design. This film doesn't draw a hard line between music and noise. A creaking door becomes part of a rising string section. A heartbeat merges into a drumbeat. A whisper becomes a synth loop. It's seamless, disorienting, and brilliant. The soundtrack isn't just riding alongside the film. It's stitched into its very fabric. You don't always know if what you're hearing is music or madness. And that's exactly how the film wants it. There are a few standout sequences where the score absolutely takes over the screen. One involves a nightmarish chase through a fog-drenched graveyard. No dialogue, just the rhythm of breath and footsteps buried beneath a crashing, chaotic wave of strings, percussion, and choir. The tempo of the music drives the scene. It's not just accompanying the action, it's pushing it. Then there's the final sequence, where the score slowly strips away all sound until all that's left is a single, droning note, so long and low it feels like it's vibrating your teeth. It's like the music is mourning the story as it ends. It's not triumphant. It's not hopeful. It's hollow, and that hollowness lingers long after the credits roll. So is the score seamless? Absolutely. Is it overpowering? Only in the best way. Like a velvet curtain falling over your head in the dark. This isn't music you tap your foot to. It's music that taps into you, and it never asks for permission. Want to dive next into set design and atmosphere? Because wait till you hear how every cobweb, candlestick, and coffin is practically alive in this film. 9. Themes and messages. Nosferatu, 2024, isn't just a reimagining of a classic horror tale. It's a philosophical meditation wrapped in darkness, blood, and decay. The deeper themes of this film aren't as loud as the jump scares. Instead, they're buried in the layers of fog and whispered in the silence between the screams. And let's face it, horror is often the perfect vessel for exploring the things we're most afraid of, whether it's fear of the unknown, loss, or even our own mortality. This film dives into those deep waters, but it doesn't just skim the surface. It lets you drown in them. First and foremost, Nosferatu isn't just about a vampire lurking in the shadows. It's about the shadow itself. The film explores the fear of what lies in the unseen. What we don't understand, what we can't control, what we can't grasp is what truly terrifies us. Orlok is not simply a monster. He's a manifestation of that fear. The darkness that surrounds him isn't just a backdrop, it's him. The film reminds us that sometimes the greatest horror doesn't come from the sharp fangs or the blood-sucking. It comes from the absence, the cold, unfeeling void that hides just out of sight. The camera plays with this theme constantly, trapping characters in places where the shadows are their only company. It asks the question, what happens when we're faced with something we can't fully see or understand? Then there's the theme of sacrifice. Ellen's role in the film isn't just about being the helpless victim. It's about the painful, necessary act of offering oneself for the greater good. Her story arc is deeply tied to this idea of selflessness, of giving up everything to stop a greater evil, even at the cost of her own soul. This theme of sacrifice isn't just about martyrdom. It's about the human capacity to confront evil, even in its most unfathomable form. The music, the pacing, and the camera all emphasize this internal struggle she faces. It's as much about her emotional and spiritual journey as it is about the physical one. But perhaps the most potent theme the film explores is the nature of desire. Not just physical desire, but the unquenchable longing for something forbidden, something dark. Orlok's hunger isn't merely for blood. It's a deeper craving for connection, for intimacy, for power, and for control. The film plays with the idea of the vampire as a metaphor for the unchecked hunger inside all of us. It's not just a desire to consume. It's the desire to be consumed by something greater, something more primal. In the film, both Orlok and Thomas are pulled into this gravitational force, the desire to conquer, to own, to be absorbed by the power of the unknown. The battle isn't just between good and evil. It's between those who are consumed by their own desires and those who fight against them. This theme is brought to life not just in the plot, but in the visual and auditory choices. Orlok's face is a portrait of longing, and the slow, rhythmic pacing of the film mirrors the pull of this insatiable desire. The film also subtly addresses the idea of corruption. It asks whether anyone can truly be pure in the face of temptation. When you're faced with something that promises eternal life, or eternal power, how much of yourself are you willing to lose? How much of your humanity? The physical transformations that the characters undergo mirror the psychological erosion they experience. And the film doesn't let you forget that each choice to pursue power, to seek darkness, is a step toward losing yourself. This theme of corruption is amplified by the slow, deliberate pacing of the film, each action and decision drawing the characters deeper into their own moral decay. Then, there's the final theme of mortality and the inevitability of death. There's a quiet but powerful rumble beneath the surface of this film that insists death is both a release and a punishment. The vampire is not just an eternal being. He is a reminder that life is finite. The way time bends and warps in this world, how characters seem to age or deteriorate without warning, plays with this idea that time itself is an oppressive force. Every character is inevitably drawn toward death, some more willingly than others, but none can escape it. The finality of this idea, the fact that death remains the great equalizer, lingers long after the film ends. Through these layered themes, Nosferatu, 2024, doesn't just serve up a chilling story, it challenges you to think about what we truly fear. It asks, how much of our fear is about what we see, and how much is about what we can't see? How much of our desire is simply a desire to escape our own mortality? How far are we willing to go in the face of the unknown? And how much of ourselves are we willing to sacrifice? These aren't themes that hit you over the head. They grow inside you, like a seed planted in the dark. The film weaves them into the fabric of its story, using silence, music, and atmosphere to reinforce them at every turn. By the end, they're not just themes. They're questions you'll carry with you long after the credits roll. Want to go deeper into how these themes are visually reinforced? I can't wait to show you how the sets and props work their own kind of dark magic. 10 visual effects and CGI. When you hear Nosferatu 2024, you probably don't think CGI extravaganza, and rightly so. This isn't a film that leans on flashy digital tricks or over-the-top effects. Instead, the visual effects serve as an eerie, subtle backdrop that feels just as ancient and unsettling as the world it creates. The effects don't steal the show, they complement it, enhancing the atmosphere in a way that feels almost like an afterthought, until you realize that it's exactly what the film needs. Let's start with the digital effects, because this is where the film could have easily gone wrong. Digital transformations, ghostly apparitions, and the occasional supernatural twist are all handled with a delicate hand. There's nothing jarring about them. Orlok's supernatural abilities, for example, aren't rendered with an eye-popping explosion of pixels. They're a quiet, creeping intrusion into the natural world. His sudden appearances, when they do happen, often occur in ways that feel almost too smooth, like he's stepping out of the darkness itself, something organic, not something that was created on a computer screen. The CGI works in harmony with the shadowy aesthetics of the film. You don't feel like you've been yanked into a video game. Instead, the effects fit into the grainy, almost vintage look of the film, allowing the digital elements to blend seamlessly with the practical effects. But let's not be fooled. Nosferatu isn't a film where CGI does all the heavy lifting. The practical effects here are the true stars. The slow, deliberate transformations that Orlok undergoes are achieved with makeup and prosthetics that make you feel his age, his decay, his otherworldly nature without any reliance on computer-generated wizardry. The cracks in his face, the sickly pallor of his skin, the veins that seem to pulse beneath his surface. These are effects that make you recoil not because they're digitally exaggerated, but because they're viscerally real. It's not about over-the-top gore, but about subtle horror that digs into your senses. And the use of practical effects isn't limited to the vampire himself. The world around the characters, especially in the castle, feels impossibly real. The crumbling walls, the flickering candles, the strange distortions in the architecture. These are all practical effects that give the world a tactile, lived-in feel. When the camera moves through the hallways, you can almost smell the musty air, the damp stone. And in moments of supernatural intensity where reality begins to bend, the effects are often practical illusions. Distorted mirrors, shifting shadows, and the occasional object that moves or falls when no one is near. These effects feel like they come from another era, a time before computers, a time when film had to trick the eye with ingenuity rather than technology. That's the charm. You never feel like the film is relying on the effects to carry the weight. It's the other way around. The effects support the atmosphere, making it feel thick, heavy, and oppressive. And the integration of CGI in this world. It's used sparingly but with precision. A particular scene that stands out involves Orlok moving through shadows, his figure twisting, distorting, and almost melting into the darkness. This digital effect is so seamless with the environment that it feels less like an effect and more like an extension of the film's eerie tone. There's no bright, exaggerated movement that screams CGI. Instead, it's a slow fade into the gloom, blending perfectly with the natural decay that surrounds it. When you see it, you feel like it should happen. It's not a surprise, it's an inevitability. The balance between practical and digital effects is key in maintaining the film's immersive feel. You can't always tell what's practical and what's digital, and that's a testament to how well the two are married. There's no moment where you feel jolted out of the experience by something too flashy or too artificial. Instead, the visuals unfold like a dream or a nightmare, depending on how you look at it, where nothing feels too polished or too clean. Everything is frayed at the edges, warped and unnatural in just the right way to keep you uneasy. And let's not forget the use of digital enhancements to amplify the supernatural feel. In a scene where the characters are confronted by apparitions or unexplainable events, the CGI works like a suggestion, a soft brush against the world of reality. It's not the star of the show. It's not here to wow you with technical prowess. It's here to enhance what's already terrifying, the unknown, the unseen, the impossible. What this film does with its visual effects is something rare. It uses technology not to distract, but to reinforce the atmosphere. The effects are always in service of the story and the mood, never overshadowing it. It's a delicate balance, one that requires a deep understanding of both film language and the power of restraint. In this world, every effect, whether digital or practical, feels like part of the same organic whole. It's a world where things are supposed to feel unnaturally wrong, and effects work in perfect harmony with that unnerving sense of being on the edge of reality. Up next, the props and set design, because the world these characters live in, it's just as important as the creatures that stalk through it. 11. Set design and locations. Imagine this. You're walking through a crumbling, fog-laden castle. The air's so thick with decay, you can practically taste it. Your footsteps echo against the stone walls, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that feel almost alive. You turn a corner, and suddenly you're face to face with an ancient book whose leather binding seems to have absorbed centuries of dust and blood. This isn't just a setting, it's a character in its own right, and in Nosferatu 2024, the locations and set design do more than provide a backdrop. They pull you into the heart of the nightmare. Let's start with the castle, because it's the most obvious and most haunting setting in the entire film. The production design doesn't just go for the old and spooky look, it leans into it, draping the castle in layers of history. You can almost feel the centuries of silence pressing down on you as you walk through its towering halls. The walls aren't just made of stone, they're made of secrets. Every crack in the stone, every rotting wood beam, feels like a piece of something forgotten, left to rot by time itself. It's not a typical Gothic castle. It's a dying place, slowly decaying from the inside out. And that decay is mirrored in the characters, especially Orlok. The settings here are more than just visual. They're atmospheric asterisk in the most immersive way. They make you feel like you've stepped into the past, into a time that hasn't been touched by the outside world. And that's exactly what you need when you're dealing with something as ancient and cursed as Nosferatu himself. But it's not all about grandiose, towering structures. The locations outside the castle, the villages, the dark, winding streets, the overgrown graveyards, are just as important in creating that sense of unease. The film doesn't just use these places as transitional backdrops. They're full of character and mood. Take the town square, for example. It feels suffocating. The narrow streets and old, crooked buildings aren't just quaint, they're claustrophobic. You get the sense that there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The fog that rolls through these streets is almost another character, constantly creeping into the shot, thickening the air with dread. And when you step into the woods, the trees feel like they've been waiting for centuries for something, or someone, to come along. There's an oppressive sense of foreboding that hangs over every location, from the town to the isolated forests, like a fog that's always creeping just out of sight. Then there's the balance between the real and the supernatural. The set design doesn't just give you physical spaces, it creates moods, and sometimes it feels like the walls are closing in on the characters. The props, whether it's the skulls scattered around Orlok's domain, the weathered furniture, or the ominous objects that seem to pulse with energy, are all carefully chosen to evoke a specific emotional reaction. The props aren't just there for decoration. They're like pieces of a puzzle, each one revealing more about the world of Nosferatu. That ancient book Orlok reads from, it's more than just a dusty prop. It feels like it's been waiting to be touched, to be opened, to unleash the horrors hidden within its pages. And speaking of objects, let's talk about those chilling little details that pepper the set design. The mirrors, for example, are an excellent touch. They don't just reflect the characters, they distort them. Their edges are worn, cracked, and sometimes they show things that aren't really there. It's these small touches that make you question everything you see. Are the characters in the film ever truly seeing what's real? Or are they caught in a warped reflection of something much darker? The props and set pieces constantly challenge the audience to look deeper, to think harder about the world they're seeing. As for the larger locations, the mountain landscapes, the village squares, the desolate shorelines, each one is carefully crafted to create a world that feels both rooted in history and cursed by it. The long, sweeping shots of the rocky landscapes add a sense of isolation and hopelessness. These aren't just backdrops, they're settings that echo the themes of decay, death, and the passage of time. Every location is chosen not just for its visual impact, but for its emotional resonance. These places are more than just where things happen. They're where the story breathes and festers. The beauty of Nosferatu's production design is how it blurs the lines between reality and nightmare. The props, the sets, the locations, they all seem to live and breathe as part of the story, creating a world that feels like it's been trapped in time, a world just on the edge of collapse. The art direction doesn't just build a setting, it builds a mood, a vibe that clings to you like the mist in the castle halls. It's this atmosphere, this relentless sense of decay and despair, that gives the film its power. The world around the characters is just as much a part of the horror as the vampire himself. Every location is a reflection of the darkness that lurks within, whether it's in the characters' hearts or in the very walls around them. When you walk through the film's world, it's not just about where the characters go. It's about how that world makes you feel. And the sets, props, and locations in Nosferatu ensure that you don't just watch the story unfold. You feel it, as if you're trapped inside it. Want to know how the tension and dread build so effortlessly? It's all in the way the world itself seems to close in around you. 12. Dialogue and script. In Nosferatu 2024, the dialogue doesn't just serve as a means to communicate. It breathes with purpose, shaping every moment of tension, terror, and revelation. The characters don't just speak to each other. Their words are often heavy with meaning, weighed down by the crushing atmosphere that surrounds them. In this world, each line feels deliberate, each word echoing through the silence like a ghost haunting the air. Right off the bat, the dialogue feels like it's coming from a different era, which is perfect for a film that's so steeped in history and lore. There's an old-fashioned quality to the way people speak, a sense of formality that seems both natural and unsettling. This isn't the kind of dialogue you hear in today's fast-paced thrillers. It's measured, thoughtful, and full of hidden depths. Every conversation is charged with unspoken tension, as if each character knows that their words could be their last, or worse, could summon something far darker than they can possibly imagine. But the dialogue is never too stiff or antiquated. It's a careful balance between period accuracy and modern sensibilities. There are moments where the characters' emotions break through the veneer of propriety, when fear, grief, or desperation spill out in ways that feel raw and real. In these moments, the words come fast, clipped, and desperate. The actors breathe life into the lines, making them feel urgent and alive in the most terrifying ways. This shift between poised dialogue and frantic emotional outbursts is what keeps the audience on edge. There's a constant push and pull between order and chaos, and the script captures that perfectly. There's an underlying poetic quality to the script, especially in the way certain phrases linger long after they're spoken. The film doesn't rely on snappy one-liners or rapid-fire banter. Instead, it's all about building an atmosphere with each line, crafting a sense of foreboding that sticks with you. The best lines in the film are the ones that you don't immediately understand, but that stick in your mind, growing more significant the longer you think about them. These aren't throwaway lines. They're laden with meaning, full of references to death, decay, and the passage of time. When Orlok speaks, every word feels like a ritual, a curse, or a prophecy, rather than just something a character says. His speech is slow, deliberate, like the weight of centuries pressing down on him. And yet, it's not just what he says, it's how he says it. The way the dialogue weaves with the silence, how his pauses stretch into uncomfortable, unbearable lengths. It's not the content of his words that's so chilling, it's the atmosphere that his voice creates. Then, you have the moments of quiet reflection, often coming from the human characters. There are lines that seem to echo the internal struggles of the characters, revealing their fears, regrets, and desires. These moments are what give the film its emotional depth, contrasting with the ever-present dread. When Ellen speaks of her fears, her words feel almost like a prayer, her vulnerability bleeding through the walls of the narrative. It's the kind of writing that doesn't just flesh out the character, it makes you feel like you're inside her mind, trapped by the same sense of inevitability that she is. The dialogue becomes a vehicle for the character's inner turmoil, creating an emotional gravity that tugs at you just as much as the horror does. And let's talk about the silences. In a film like Nosferatu, sometimes what's not said is just as powerful as the dialogue itself. There are stretches of time where the characters don't speak at all, and it's during these moments that the weight of the film's atmosphere comes crashing down. The script knows when to let the silence fill the space, and it knows when to break it with a single, impactful line that cuts through the tension. There's a moment early in the film where a character whispers, "It's already too late," and the words seem to hang in the air, charged with a foreboding that the audience can feel in their bones. It's not a moment of grand speech. It's a whisper, a simple sentence that feels like a death sentence in itself. One of the most striking aspects of the script is how it uses theme in its dialogue. There's an undercurrent of inevitability in the way characters speak. It's like they all know something terrible is coming, but can't quite find the words to express it fully. There are echoes of fate throughout the script, with characters often speaking in riddles or alluding to things beyond their control. When they try to fight back or reason with the darkness, their words feel powerless. Asterisk too little, too late star. This creates an eerie sense of resignation in the film's dialogue that permeates every conversation. Even when the characters speak with resolve, you can hear the cracks beneath their confidence, the recognition that their struggle is ultimately futile. In the rare moments where humor surfaces, it's dark, sharp, and unexpected. There are lines that break the tension with dry wit, but even these moments have a bitter aftertaste. The humor never feels out of place. It's like a survival mechanism, a way for the characters to cope with the hopelessness around them. These lines, though few, are incredibly memorable because they offer a glimpse of humanity in the face of unimaginable horror. They're not there to lighten the mood, but to remind us that even in the darkest moments, people still search for meaning, for connection, and for some semblance of control. The dialogue in Nosferatu isn't just memorable because of what's said, it's memorable because of how it fits into the larger fabric of the film. It's a rhythm, a pulse that matches the slow, creeping tension of the story. Each line is carefully crafted to add to the atmosphere, to deepen the mystery, and to pull you further into the terrifying world the film creates. The script doesn't just tell a story, it weaves it into the very air the characters breathe, making every word feel like a necessary piece of the haunting puzzle. 13. Genre execution. Nosferatu, 2024, takes the vampire genre, drags it through the cobwebbed corridors of horror, and gives it a fresh coat of eerie dread that feels both familiar and unsettlingly new. This isn't your run-of-the-mill vampire flick, not the kind that leans on flashy action or the usual tropes of seduction and immortality. Instead, it takes the core of the vampire mythos, the ancient, terrifying, almost unknowable horror of it, and brings it to life in a way that both honors and subverts the conventions we've come to expect from the genre. Let's talk about subversion first. A lot of vampire stories rely heavily on a specific set of tropes. The suave, charming vampire with an aura of mystery, the forbidden romance, and of course, the dramatic final showdown. But Nosferatu doesn't follow those rules. The vampire here isn't some alluring, seductive creature. No, Orlok is something far more grotesque, something that feels unnatural in the most visceral way. His presence isn't meant to fascinate you, it's meant to disturb you. There's no romanticism here. No, I'm lonely, I'm cursed speeches that we've come to expect. Instead, Orlok is a force of pure evil, a creature who crawls out of the shadows not for power, but for something far darker. He's not a tragic figure. He's a manifestation of death itself, and his every action is deliberate, calculated, and terrifying. This decision to move away from the charming vampire archetype and into something rawer, more primal, helps to set this film apart from others in the genre. And this subversion extends beyond just Orlok. The setting itself, while quintessentially gothic, is stripped of the usual glamour we associate with vampire tales. There are no grand, opulent castles here, bathed in the light of moonlit windows. Instead, the world feels dilapidated, decaying, like something that's been left untouched by time, a world where even the most basic human comforts have rotted away. The film rejects the genre's tendency to idealize the horror world, instead embracing a sense of foreboding and helplessness. Everything is just slightly off: the architecture, the landscapes, the people. It's a world that's both familiar and alien, a reflection of the nightmare that's slowly creeping through it. But that doesn't mean the film is a total departure from genre expectations. It still plays with a lot of the classic elements that make vampire stories so irresistible, just with a twist. The atmosphere is thick with tension, and there's plenty of suspense. Every time Orlok appears, the tension ramps up. Every corner turned feels like it might be the last. It's a slow burn of dread, where the lack of action becomes just as unsettling as any chase scene. The sense of impending doom builds relentlessly, and when the action finally does break out, it hits hard and fast. But even then, it doesn't feel gratuitous. This isn't a film that needs to pile on the action or violence to prove its horror credentials. The tension lives in the silences, in the spaces between the characters' words and actions. The quiet, steady drip of dread is enough to make you sit on the edge of your seat, waiting for the next horrifying revelation. In terms of genre conventions, it's the pacing that really takes things in a direction that's refreshing. While modern vampire films often thrive on quick cuts and action-packed sequences, Nosferatu takes its time, allowing the dread to settle under your skin. It's a deliberate pace, almost like a slow march toward an inevitable end. This refusal to rush the story, to cater to the need for constant thrills, is a welcome change. The film builds its horror not through constant danger, but through its atmosphere, its slow reveals, and the sense that the characters are powerless in the face of something they don't even fully understand. It's more about what you don't see than what you do. As for humor, there's not much of it, and that's perfect. This is a film that doesn't try to balance the scares with levity or comedic relief, and that choice is a nod to the genre's roots. The vampire stories of old weren't filled with snappy one-liners or quirky sidekicks. They were about unease, fear, and the slow realization that something terrible was happening just beyond your reach. In Nosferatu, the absence of humor creates a stark contrast to modern horror films that often feel the need to lighten the mood with wit or sarcasm. Here, there's no room for jokes. There's just the weight of the unknown. That's not to say the film doesn't offer moments of humanity. The characters are still real people, and there's drama in their responses to the horror around them. But even the emotional weight is handled differently here. There's no melodramatic romance, no grand speeches about love and loss. Instead, the drama unfolds in small, quiet moments, shared glances, whispered fears, the unspoken recognition that they're all being drawn into something larger than themselves. The drama comes from their helplessness, their growing awareness that they are trapped in a world they cannot escape. As for fresh ideas, the film doesn't just retread old ground, it reinvents it. The way it presents Orlok as more of a force of nature than a tragic figure is revolutionary for the genre. The absence of the traditional vampire romance, makes way for a more haunting exploration of human vulnerability. The film also plays with the very idea of who the real monster is. It's not just Orlok. It's the desperation, the fear, and the internal darkness that each character brings to the table. The genre conventions of the past are still there, but they're turned on their head in ways that make this film feel like a fresh take on a classic. In the end, Nosferatu 2024 walks a fine line between honoring the vampire genre and breaking free from its chains. It's not afraid to be slow, to be subtle, to take its time, and to explore horror in ways that go beyond just jumps and thrills. It's a film that redefines what it means to be a vampire film, making us realize that sometimes the real horror isn't in the fangs or the blood. It's in the dread that creeps up on you, silent and steady, until you can't escape it. 14. Social and cultural commentary. Nosferatu 2024 may seem, at first glance, like a straightforward horror film about ancient evil and the terror it brings. But as you dig deeper, you realize it's a lot more than just a supernatural story. The film subtly yet powerfully weaves in social and cultural commentary, making sharp observations about the human condition, fear, and the darker corners of society that we often ignore. First off, there's the theme of fear of the unknown, which the film uses as a reflection of contemporary anxiety. In a world that feels increasingly divided and uncertain, the horror in Nosferatu doesn't just come from a supernatural creature. It comes from the overwhelming, omnipresent sense that we're all teetering on the edge of something catastrophic. The terror Orlok embodies isn't just a personal nightmare for the characters, but a metaphor for the unseen, the hidden threats in society. It's a commentary on the way we often live in a constant state of unease, aware that something terrible might be lurking, but unable to see it, unable to confront it directly. The film taps into a cultural fear of contagion, not just in the literal, viral sense, but in the way fear spreads like wildfire through society, eating away at the fabric of our lives. The choice of setting, too, is a subtle nod to modern cultural issues. The decaying, crumbling world in which the characters live is a clear reflection of the way some communities feel today. Left behind, eroded by time and neglect, stuck in a loop of decay that they can't seem to escape. The setting isn't just atmospheric. It serves as a visual metaphor for the state of society itself, with everything from the crumbling buildings to the barren landscapes, acting as a reflection of moral, cultural, and even economic decay. The film doesn't need to explicitly mention societal collapse because the environment speaks for itself. It's a world on the brink, much like many aspects of the real world today, where communities face rising inequality, environmental destruction, and a general sense that the worst is yet to come. Then there's the way the film handles otherness, the fear and mistrust of the outsider, the foreign, the unfamiliar. Orlok, as a creature of ancient evil, is the ultimate other, someone who doesn't belong in the world of the living. He is a being from beyond, and his presence threatens to disrupt the delicate balance of the world around him. This plays into a long-standing cultural fear of the outsider, something that has been magnified in recent years with debates surrounding immigration, nationalism, and the fear of cultural dilution. Orlok's malevolent, alien nature taps into this fear, creating a creature who is both alien and universally terrifying. In this way, the film subtly critiques how society treats those who are seen as different or outside the norm, how the unknown is often met with fear, hostility, and an urge to destroy. Another interesting aspect of the film's cultural commentary is its exploration of power and control. In Nosferatu, the vampire isn't just a predator in the traditional sense. He's a representation of unchecked, overwhelming power. He doesn't just feed on blood, he feeds on fear, and in doing so, he embodies a kind of ruthless control. The film shows us that true horror isn't necessarily in the physical violence, but in the way fear can control individuals and entire societies. This theme feels particularly relevant today as we see how fear is used by some governments, media outlets, and other powerful entities to manipulate populations. Whether it's fear of the other, fear of change, or fear of something we don't understand, Nosferatu shows us how those in power can use fear to instill control, create chaos, and undermine the very fabric of society. The film's handling of gender and vulnerability also deserves attention. Ellen, as the female protagonist, is a character who might seem like a damsel in distress at first glance, but the film does something unexpected with her arc. While she might initially seem like a passive character, her eventual role in the story reveals a strength and agency that flips the traditional gender dynamics often found in horror films. Ellen is not simply saved by the male characters. Her fate is tied to her ability to confront the darkness in ways that the others cannot. The film plays with the cultural stereotype of the passive woman and turns it on its head, offering a fresh perspective on how women's vulnerability, while often exploited in horror narratives, can also be the source of great power and resilience. It's an interesting commentary on gender roles, particularly in how horror films have historically framed women as either victims or villains, but rarely as active agents in their own fates. Lastly, there's the film's exploration of mortality and immortality, which speaks to the existential crisis many of us grapple with today. In a world where people are living longer, dealing with the rise of artificial intelligence and exploring the potential for immortality through technology, Nosferatu taps into these fears. Orlok, an immortal being trapped in his own twisted existence, is a metaphor for the dangers of an unchanging, unyielding life. His immortality isn't a gift, it's a curse, a slow erosion of the soul. The film suggests that the fear of death is something that makes life meaningful, and without it, life becomes a never-ending spiral of decay. This perspective feels like a response to modern society's obsession with staying young, with avoiding death at all costs through medical advancements, cosmetic surgery, and an ever-growing desire for eternal life. Nosferatu, 2024, doesn't hit you over the head with its commentary, but it's there, subtly influencing the story's atmosphere and the way the characters interact with each other and their world. It uses its horror elements not just to terrify, but to reflect the anxieties and fears of the society that created it. It's a film that's deeply entrenched in cultural and social commentary, using the vampire mythos as a vehicle to explore the darkness of the human psyche and the world we inhabit. In doing so, it invites viewers to not just be scared, but to think about the larger issues that continue to haunt our lives. Issues of power, control, fear, and the terrifying unknown. 15. Audience engagement. When you watch Nosferatu 2024, you're not just a passive viewer. You're an active participant in the horror that unfolds. It's a film that doesn't just ask you to watch from a distance. It demands that you feel every moment, every chill that creeps up your spine, and every subtle shift in the character's fate. From the opening frames, you know this isn't going to be your standard, formulaic horror flick. The film's atmosphere is almost tactile, like you could reach out and feel the cold of the mist swirling around you or the darkness pressing against your skin. It's a visceral experience that sinks into your bones, making you feel like you're living the terror, not just observing it. There are several moments in the film that are guaranteed to spark reactions, and not just the typical jump scares you might expect. Sure, there's the occasional sudden shock, but it's the slow burn tension that really gets under your skin. It's the kind of film that doesn't need to constantly slap you with loud noises or dramatic music to make you react. It's the stillness, the silence, and the long, uncomfortable pauses that really get to you. These moments of uncomfortable quiet, where you just know something is about to happen, are the ones that leave the audience gripping their seats, hearts racing, wondering if the tension will break in a horrifying explosion or simply suffocate them in silence. It keeps you guessing, and that guessing makes you uneasy, which is exactly what a horror film should do. When it comes to emotional reactions, Nosferatu isn't just about shocking you, it's about making you feel something. And it's not just fear. It digs into a range of emotions, from grief to helplessness to a creeping sense of despair. The character dynamics, especially between Ellen and the others, tap into something deeply human, and their emotional journeys become more relatable than you might expect from a film set in a decaying, gothic world. When Ellen finally takes matters into her own hands, it's not just a thrilling moment for the audience. It's a cathartic release of everything that's been building up until that point. It's a film that doesn't just want to make you jump or scream. It wants you to invest in the characters' pain and struggle, to feel the weight of their fear and decisions. The film also invites discussion in a big way. As the credits roll, it leaves a lot of questions hanging in the air. What was the true nature of the relationship between the characters? How much of the horror was real, and how much was a manifestation of the human psyche? Did Ellen's actions truly change the course of events, or did they only delay the inevitable? These are the kinds of questions that linger long after the film is over, making you want to talk about it with friends or revisit the film for a deeper understanding. It's a movie that doesn't just spoon-feed its answers to you. It leaves you to draw your own conclusions, and that's what makes it so engaging. It doesn't answer everything neatly, and in some ways, that makes the experience all the more compelling. It makes you want to dissect the layers, to uncover the meaning behind every shadow, every line of dialogue, and every subtle visual cue. Repeat viewings of Nosferatu are a must. The more you watch it, the more you start to notice the small details, the foreshadowing, and the intricate ways the film sets up its horror. Every frame is packed with meaning, and once you've experienced the tension and dread once, you'll want to go back to catch the nuances you missed the first time. The cinematography, the pacing, even the sound design, everything is designed to be experienced repeatedly, and each time you watch, there's something new to uncover. It's one of those films that grows with you, revealing more about itself the deeper you look. The emotional weight becomes more powerful, and the horror, far from diminishing, feels more potent as you understand the true depth of what's happening. And let's not forget about the discussions that will spark. After seeing Nosferatu, it's hard not to dive into conversations about what it all means. The film touches on so many themes, and it does so in a way that invites different interpretations. The character dynamics, the symbolism, the way the supernatural elements play into real-world anxieties. There's so much to chew on. Everyone will come away with a slightly different take, and that's part of the film's appeal. It doesn't hand you all the answers. Instead, it encourages you to think, to dig deeper, and to explore your own thoughts about what the film is really saying about fear, power, and mortality. Nosferatu also makes you feel the terror of isolation. It's not just that the characters are physically alone in their struggle with Orlok. It's that they're alone in their emotional journeys, grappling with their own fears, doubts, and weaknesses. And in a world where we're all grappling with our own existential questions, our own isolation in some ways, that emotional resonance hits hard. It's easy to relate to the characters' sense of vulnerability and the way their personal battles intertwine with the larger, supernatural horror makes the stakes feel that much higher. You're not just invested in the plot. You're invested in how the characters will overcome or succumb to the horrors around them. In the end, Nosferatu 2024 is a film that doesn't just want you to feel scared. It wants you to feel deeply. It's a movie that lingers in your mind, long after you've left the theater, making you question what you saw, how you felt, and what it all means. It invites you into its world of dread, forces you to confront uncomfortable truths, and leaves you with more than just a fleeting fright. It makes you reflect, discuss, and most importantly, feel the lasting impact of the horror that it unleashes. It's the kind of film that becomes a talking point, a shared experience among those who are brave enough to sit through it and experience its eerie magic. 16. Comparisons to similar films. When you first dive into Nosferatu 2024, it's impossible not to draw comparisons to other iconic films in the horror and vampire genres, as well as to the rich legacy of the Nosferatu franchise itself. From the classic 1922 silent film to its modern reimaginings, the Nosferatu mythos has been reinterpreted many times over the years. But this new entry doesn't simply coast on the coattails of its predecessors. Instead, it carves out a unique space in the horror genre while paying homage to its roots. First, when you think about vampire films, your mind likely goes to big names like Dracula or the Twilight Saga. But unlike the more romanticized portrayals of vampires in popular culture, where the creatures of the night are often turned into tragic, brooding antiheroes. Asterisk Nosferatu, 2024. Asterisk keeps the horror raw and unrelenting. Orlok is not a misunderstood soul or a victim of his condition. He's pure, terrifying evil, and the film doesn't soften his menace. This sets it apart from more recent vampire films where the creatures often wrestle with their existence, adding a layer of depth that is meant to evoke sympathy. In Nosferatu, the vampire is a predator, and the movie plays on the primal fear of being hunted. There's something about this pure, ancient evil that's refreshing, especially in a landscape where vampire films often lean toward the sympathetic or the sexy. In comparison to other classic horror films, Nosferatu, 2024, stands as an impressive blend of homage and innovation. The 1922 Nosferatu, directed by F.W. Murnau, is still regarded as a pinnacle of early cinema horror, with its eerie atmosphere and haunting imagery setting the tone for generations of filmmakers to come. But where Murnau's film was a masterclass in restraint, relying heavily on its expressionist visuals and the tension built through its silence, the 2024 version adds a new layer of emotional and psychological depth. The earlier film's focus was purely atmospheric, building dread through shadows, eerie music, and visual trickery. The 2024 version, however, takes a more modern approach to the pacing, using cutting-edge cinematography and a sharper sense of psychological horror. It feels like a direct response to the evolving tastes of horror audiences. The horror isn't just about spooky visuals. It's about building an emotional connection with the characters and, through them, with the audience's deepest fears. While Murnau's Nosferatu was terrifying through its minimalism, the 2024 iteration amps up the emotional stakes, creating a more visceral experience. Director-wise, Nosferatu, 2024, brings with it a particular sensibility that feels familiar to fans of the director's previous work, especially if they've seen films with strong atmospheric storytelling and deeply unsettling psychological tension. It's as if the director is bringing their signature style of building dread through subtlety and attention to detail into this reimagining. If you've seen their other films, ones that weave complex layers of horror, from slow-building tension to outright terror, you'll notice similar techniques here. Yet, in the case of Nosferatu, 2024, there's a clear evolution in how the director handles pacing and tone. Where their previous films might have lingered in the psychological terror and left a lot to the imagination, this one steps into a more tangible, almost corporeal horror. It's as if the director is taking the best parts of their past work, building emotional tension, using silence and space effectively, and layering that on top of a much more physically horrifying narrative. Now, when we talk about horror franchises in general, Nosferatu, 2024, isn't about the same kind of jump scare thrills that have come to dominate franchises like The Conjuring or Insidious. Instead, it plays on the older, more atmospheric horror that you'd find in films like The Witch or Hereditary. Films that make you feel dread slowly building until it overwhelms you. It's an eerie world of decaying landscapes, tortured souls, and the fear of the unknown. The pacing here isn't about hitting you with shock after shock, but rather creating a constant undercurrent of tension that simmers beneath the surface until it breaks. The film rewards those who appreciate the quiet moments, the slow build-up of terror, rather than those looking for a constant barrage of scares. This makes Nosferatu, 2024, stand out in today's landscape of fast-paced, heavily cut horror films. It's not just a rehash of past vampire tropes. It's a deliberate meditation on horror, letting the suspense and atmosphere speak louder than the violence. And then there's the question of how it stacks up against other recent remakes or reboots of classic horror tales. Reboots often fall into the trap of either trying to replicate the original film's magic or modernizing it in a way that feels disconnected from the spirit of the original. But Nosferatu, 2024, does something more nuanced. It honors the legacy of the first film without trying to copy it outright. The atmosphere, the tension, and the iconic look of Orlok are all here, but they're presented through a modern lens. It's not about glorifying the past, but rather about reinterpreting it, adding new layers that resonate with contemporary audiences while still respecting the source material. While it's hard not to compare it to the Twilight saga, it's important to note that Nosferatu as vampire is on an entirely different level. Orlok isn't the romantic, tragic figure that some other vampire portrayals have become. He's a force of pure evil, an ancient, predatory creature that doesn't ask for sympathy. And that makes him more terrifying, more visceral than any modern, misunderstood vampire with a soul. In comparison to Twilight and similar works, Nosferatu, 2024, isn't interested in exploring the moral dilemma of a vampire's inner life or his love interests. It's not concerned with making you feel for the creature. It's about showing you the terror that he brings and leaving you with a deep sense of unease. Overall, this Nosferatu doesn't just follow a familiar formula. It shifts it, creating something that feels both nostalgic and fresh. It's a perfect blend of old-school horror elements and modern sensibilities, bringing a classic tale into a new era without sacrificing its core terror. It takes cues from the history of vampire films and, at the same time, offers something entirely new. Whether you're a fan of the original, a lover of slow-burn horror, or someone just looking for something to send chills down your spine, Nosferatu, 2024, offers a unique, captivating experience. 17. Symbolism and metaphors. From the moment Nosferatu, 2024, starts, it's clear that this film is drenched in symbolism, layers of meaning that seep into every frame and every action. It's a movie that isn't just telling a story on the surface. It's inviting you to look deeper, to dig into the visual cues and metaphors that hint at something far more profound. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, only instead of tears, you uncover a chilling realization that stays with you long after the film ends. Take the setting, for instance. The decaying architecture, the fog, the long, empty hallways, all of these elements aren't just there to create a spooky backdrop. They're symbols of death, isolation, and decay. The crumbling structures reflect the crumbling of humanity itself. There's a sense that the world in Nosferatu is dying, eroding under the weight of some ancient evil. But it's not just about the physical decay. It's about the spiritual and emotional rot that comes with facing a force like Orlok. These buildings aren't just places where characters live or die. They're extensions of the inner torment and fear that drive the story. The walls closing in, the shadows lengthening. They all serve as metaphors for the characters' sense of entrapment, both physical and emotional. There's no escape from the terror that surrounds them, and these decaying structures amplify that feeling. The fog, often used in the film as a literal and metaphorical shroud, is another key symbol. It represents confusion, the blurring of reality and illusion, and the suffocating effect of fear. Just like the fog that obscures the landscape, the characters' understanding of their situation is clouded. They're constantly grasping at straws, trying to find clarity, but the truth, like the fog, is elusive and shifting. And then there's the way the fog literally traps them. It's as though the film is saying that the characters' fear is as much a part of their environment as the fog itself. It's something they can't see, but can't escape. In a world where everything is covered in this eerie mist, clarity is impossible, and so is salvation. The presence of light and shadow in the film is also filled with meaning. Orlok, for instance, is always associated with darkness, his pale, otherworldly form standing in stark contrast to the deep shadows that envelop him. Light, when it does appear, feels like a fleeting promise of safety or truth, but it's rarely sustained. Every time the light threatens to illuminate the truth, it's snuffed out, only to leave the characters and the audience with the uncomfortable knowledge that what they thought they understood is just another illusion. This recurring theme of light versus dark also plays into the psychological aspects of the story. The light is often associated with knowledge, hope, or revelation, but it's fleeting, always just out of reach, as though the truth itself is something too dangerous for the characters to fully grasp. The darkness, on the other hand, is where Orlok thrives and where the character's worst fears are given form. The character of Ellen serves as a major focal point for the film's use of symbolism. Her vulnerability and purity contrast sharply with the malevolent, corrupting force that Orlok represents. She is often framed in soft light, as if to highlight her role as the symbol of innocence and sacrifice. Ellen's eventual act of selflessness, her willing sacrifice to stop Orlok, becomes an important metaphor for the concept of redemption, or at least the possibility of it, in a world that seems overrun by darkness. But it's not just a simple act of heroism. It's a statement about the intersection of good and evil, the ways in which both can be intertwined. Ellen's actions aren't purely driven by selflessness. There's a recognition that she, too, is part of the world Orlok has infiltrated, and that she, like everyone else, must face the consequences of that evil. Orlok, of course, is the biggest symbol of all. He's not just a vampire. He's a manifestation of death itself. His monstrous form, with its elongated limbs and sharp features, makes him appear as something beyond human, an entity so ancient and powerful that it exists outside the realm of time and space as we know it. He's not bound by the same rules as the humans in the film. His presence is constantly linked to decay, to the ravaging of life, and his very being challenges the notion of life and death itself. He is an immortal force, a metaphor for the inevitability of death, a presence that can't be avoided or ignored. Orlok is the terror that never truly leaves, the knowledge that death is always lurking, always waiting. And in the 2024 iteration, his symbolism is more pronounced. He's not just a creature of the night. He's a metaphor for the encroaching darkness in all things, the thing that devours life in both a literal and existential sense. The film also uses the concept of blood as a recurring motif. While it's a classic symbol in vampire lore, in Nosferatu it takes on a more symbolic meaning, representing life itself. Blood is the essence that Orlok craves, not only to sustain his unnatural existence, but also to taint and corrupt what remains of human life. In this sense, blood becomes the currency of existence, the commodity that allows life to continue, but also the one thing that perpetuates the cycle of evil and decay. It's a reminder that everything, even life itself, can be corrupted by darkness. But perhaps the most significant symbol is the recurring motif of the mirror. In several key scenes, characters find themselves looking into mirrors, and what they see is not always what they expect. Mirrors are often associated with reflection and truth, but in Nosferatu they serve as a reminder that perception is deceptive. Characters look into mirrors, but instead of seeing themselves, they're often confronted with a distorted version of reality. This plays into the film's larger themes of identity, illusion, and the power of fear to warp what we think we know. Mirrors, in this context, aren't just tools for reflection. They're windows into the distorted, fractured nature of reality that Nosferatu constantly toys with. The truth is there, but it's always just out of reach, hidden behind layers of illusion and fear. Ultimately, the symbolism and metaphors in Nosferatu 2024 are what make the film more than just a horror story. They elevate it into a profound exploration of the human condition, of fear, decay, and the eternal struggle between light and dark. Each element, the fog, the light, the mirrors, the blood, adds to the depth of the story, making it not just a terrifying experience, but a deeply introspective one. It's a film that invites you to look beyond the surface and find meaning in the darkness. And the more you watch, the more you realize that every image, every choice is part of a greater tapestry of terror and truth. 18. Franchise or historical context. When you step into Nosferatu 2024, you're not just entering a single film. You're stepping into a world with deep historical roots, a world that's been shaped by nearly a century of horror cinema. The Nosferatu legacy dates back to 1922, when F.W. Murnau's silent masterpiece introduced the world to Count Orlok, one of the most iconic figures in cinematic horror. That first Nosferatu was a loose adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it became a foundational work for the horror genre, influencing generations of filmmakers, from expressionist cinema to modern-day horror auteurs. So, when we see Nosferatu 2024, it's not just a random reboot or remake. It's a continuation of a cultural and cinematic conversation that's been happening for almost 100 years. This new iteration does more than just retell the story. It builds on the mythology of Nosferatu, adding its own twists while respecting the source material. The franchise has evolved over the years, with multiple remakes, reimaginings, and tributes. But this 2024 version does something special by weaving in modern storytelling techniques, while keeping the essence of Murnau's original film intact. It's like a love letter to the history of Nosferatu, but it's also very much its own beast. By setting the tone of dread, decay, and isolation, it takes you back to the roots of what made Nosferatu legendary, while offering something new that resonates with today's audience. What makes this version stand out in the Nosferatu lineage is how it handles its historical context, both the story setting and the influence of the past on its visual and thematic choices. Unlike the original, which was limited by the technological constraints of its time, the 2024 version has the freedom to bring its supernatural elements to life in a much more visually arresting way. The filmmakers are clearly aware of the significance of the original film and its place in horror history, and they make deliberate choices to evoke the style and atmosphere of Murnau's 1922 masterpiece. But they also recognize that the landscape of horror has changed drastically since then. Horror today is much more psychological, more visceral, and more immersive, and Nosferatu 2024 capitalizes on that, blending old-world horror with modern sensibilities. But it's not just about technical innovation. There's a sense of reverence for the historical context of Nosferatu, for the way it shook audiences of the 1920s and inspired a wave of horror cinema that followed. The vampire myth, though well established, took on a whole new life with Orlok, who wasn't the charismatic, tortured romantic hero that later depictions like Bela Lugosi's Dracula or modern adaptations would portray. Orlok was, and remains, an embodiment of terror in its purest form. In 2024, that terrifying image is re-examined, updated for a new generation, but with deep respect for its origins. The film taps into a similar atmosphere of dread, drawing from the gothic horror tradition that Nosferatu set in motion while adding a layer of psychological complexity and modern horror aesthetics. The historical context doesn't stop with the film's legacy, though. The period in which Nosferatu is set is a key part of its narrative, and it's important to recognize how well the film captures the sense of time and place. The crumbling, eerie settings aren't just for effect. They reflect the world of the film, the late 19th or early 20th century, a time when superstition and the fear of the unknown were much more palpable. People lived in a world where the supernatural was still taken seriously, and the fear of disease, death, and decay were very real. The film plays on this historical context by making Orlok's monstrous nature feel like a reflection of society's anxieties, a literalization of the fears that people carried with them in that era. The locations are also a key component of the film's historical accuracy. The 2024 film does an incredible job of capturing that old-world, Eastern European Gothic charm. The landscapes feel like they've been lifted straight out of the past, with towering castles, fog-choked forests, and decaying villages that all feel perfectly in tune with the late 1800s or early 1900s setting. It's a period where the line between the rational world and the supernatural was thinner than it is today, and the filmmakers used the setting to its fullest potential. From the architecture to the costumes to the cultural atmosphere, the world of Nosferatu feels deeply rooted in a specific historical moment, and the film does an admirable job of immersing the audience in that world. But as much as the film embraces its historical setting, it also doesn't shy away from pulling in modern influences. This Nosferatu isn't just about nostalgia for the past. It's about reinterpreting it for today. The horror in this film is timeless, but the storytelling techniques such as pacing, camera work, and visual effects are very much of the present day. It's this marriage of the old and the new that makes Nosferatu 2024. Feel both fresh and familiar, a perfect tribute to the history of the franchise while carving out its own space in the genre. In terms of historical context, Nosferatu 2024 isn't a film bogged down by its legacy or the need to adhere strictly to historical accuracy. Rather, it uses the richness of its history as a jumping-off point for something new and inventive. It's aware of its place in the Nosferatu lineage and horror history, but it doesn't let that define or limit it. Instead, it takes those historical elements, pays them respect, and builds upon them, creating a film that feels like both a continuation and a reinvention of the franchise. For fans of the original and the many reimaginings of Nosferatu that have come after, this film provides a satisfying sense of continuity, while also offering a new take that's relevant for contemporary horror fans. It's a film that speaks to the past while looking toward the future, acknowledging the cultural significance of the Nosferatu myth while reinterpreting it for a new generation. 19. Budget and box office. When it comes to Nosferatu 2024, the film's budget is a fascinating topic, especially when you compare it to the striking production quality that the film delivers. The movie isn't working with an unlimited budget like some blockbuster franchises, but it still has the resources to create a haunting atmosphere, impressive practical effects, and breathtaking cinematography. You get the sense that every dollar spent went into enhancing the chilling atmosphere of the film. The production design, the intricate sets, and the chilling, gothic landscapes all scream attention to detail, showing that the filmmakers knew exactly how to maximize their resources. You don't need a massive budget to create an intense, immersive world when you're clever with your choices. This isn't a film that's relying on flashy CGI or over-the-top spectacle. It's about mood, tone, and tension. And that's where the budget really shines. The minimal, yet effective special effects are integrated into the film in such a way that you barely notice they're there until you realize how perfectly they fit into the world the film is building. The use of practical effects, like makeup for Orlok, gives the film an old-school, eerie vibe, enhancing the historical feel while still staying relevant to modern horror sensibilities. It's clear the filmmakers made strategic choices, focusing on what would have the biggest emotional impact rather than just going for the biggest visual spectacle. This smart decision-making helps the film punch well above its weight, considering the budget. Now, when you look at the film's box office performance, the story takes some interesting turns. Horror films tend to do well at the box office, especially ones that tap into nostalgia or draw upon a beloved franchise, and Nosferatu 2024 definitely benefits from the legacy of its predecessors. It's a movie with a built-in audience, thanks to its connection to the iconic 1922 silent classic and its place in the broader history of horror cinema. But while it might not be in the same league as the highest-grossing horror films of recent years, it definitely makes a respectable showing. What's intriguing about the box office performance is how much the marketing and audience reception played into it. Nosferatu 2024 wasn't just promoted as another vampire film. It was marketed as a bold reimagining of a cinematic classic, and that intrigue drew in a crowd. Horror fans, cinephiles, and even general moviegoers were excited to see how the filmmakers would reinterpret such a historic piece of cinema. The marketing capitalized on the mystique surrounding the Nosferatu legend, pushing the themes of terror, decay, and the supernatural, exactly the kind of hooks that could draw in an audience looking for something both new and nostalgic. The early buzz surrounding the film was positive, with many praising its visual style and ability to capture the unsettling mood of the original while offering a fresh take. This word of mouth helped build momentum, and though the film might not have broken box office records, it definitely made an impact in the horror community. There's something to be said for the way the movie embraced its roots while making itself accessible to a contemporary audience. It struck that balance between honoring the legacy and making something fresh, and that's a tough act to pull off. In terms of financial success, the film's box office performance seems to align with what you might expect from a niche horror film with a bit of a cult following. It wasn't a runaway hit, but it wasn't a massive disappointment either. it did well enough to justify its existence, to prove that there's still a market for films that blend classic horror with modern sensibilities. But let's not forget that it's not just about how much the film makes in theaters. The reception of Nosferatu 2024 has been strong on home video, streaming platforms, and other media. The film's strong atmosphere and haunting visuals make it one of those films that audiences will come back to time and time again, creating a long-tail revenue stream that could very well contribute to its overall financial success. Moreover, the buzz it generated among horror fans, film critics, and fans of the original Nosferatu has kept the conversation about the movie alive long after its release. It's not the kind of film you forget easily, and that enduring appeal might help find success beyond the box office, through streaming platforms and word of mouth. Plus, horror films have this unique quality. They tend to find their audience long after the initial release, especially when they have something special to offer. In that sense, Nosferatu 2024 may turn out to be one of those slow-burn successes that gains more attention over time. Ultimately, while the film's budget might not rival the massive budgets of the biggest franchises, it shows how you can make a strong impact with a more modest budget if you focus on the right elements. The box office numbers reflect that, showing that people are hungry for fresh takes on classic tales, especially when those tales are as iconic as Nosferatu. The movie may not have shattered box office records, but it certainly holds its own in terms of both production quality and audience reception, proving that with the right balance of marketing, heritage, and talent, a film like Nosferatu 2024 can make a strong mark in a genre as competitive as horror. 20. Where to watch. If you're wondering where to catch Nosferatu 2024 and dive into its eerie, haunting world, you're in luck because there are plenty of ways to experience it, whether you're all about the big screen or prefer to settle in with a more intimate viewing at home. First off, if you're a fan of the classic theater experience, the film is making its rounds in select theaters. There's something special about watching a movie like Nosferatu on the big screen, especially given its dark, atmospheric style and haunting visuals. Imagine the massive shadows, the chilling silence, the tension building up with every passing frame. All of that feels even more immersive when you're sitting in a dark theater, surrounded by an audience on the edge of their seats. It's a full-on cinematic experience, and if you can catch a showing, it's definitely the way to go for the complete, spine-chilling effect. But let's be real, not everyone can get to a theater, and that's where the flexibility of modern streaming and digital rentals comes into play. Thankfully, Nosferatu 2024 is available for streaming on a few major platforms, so you don't have to miss out if you're more of a homebody. You can grab it on your favorite streaming service, where you can pause it, rewind those tense moments, and savor the eerie atmosphere from the comfort of your couch. Streaming gives you the luxury of revisiting key scenes or simply soaking in the atmosphere at your own pace. Plus, you won't have to deal with any theater distractions, and you can enjoy it with a bowl of popcorn in hand, or whatever your snack of choice is. For those of you who still appreciate the classic digital rental experience, Nosferatu 2024 is also available for rent on platforms like Amazon, iTunes, or Google Play. Renting the film might just be the perfect option if you want to have it for a set amount of time without committing to a subscription or streaming service. It's also great for those who want to dip into the film without having to sign up for a service they might not be familiar with or already subscribe to. Now, as for the best way to watch Nosferatu 2024, it all depends on the experience you're craving. If you want the full immersive vibe, catching it in theaters is definitely the top choice. There's something about the big screen that heightens the tension and makes the eerie atmosphere even more pronounced. However, if you're planning on watching it at home, do yourself a favor and turn down the lights, crank up the volume, and maybe even watch it with a pair of good headphones to truly appreciate the audio design and subtle details. The visuals are designed to draw you in, and the audio is just as crucial in setting the mood. So setting the right atmosphere is key to experiencing the film at its fullest. For those who love revisiting films and dissecting every layer, streaming or renting it allows you to rewind and catch those little moments you might have missed the first time around. Plus, you can discuss the film at length with friends afterward, sharing thoughts on the eerie symbolism, the atmosphere, and the haunting imagery. Whether you're streaming on a big TV or on a laptop, the film is still incredibly effective in creating an unsettling experience that will stay with you long after the credits roll. Ultimately, the best way to watch Nosferatu 2024 is all about how you want to engage with it. Theaters offer the immersive experience, while streaming and digital rental give you the comfort of watching it at your own pace. Either way, the film is sure to pull you into its dark, captivating world. It's just a matter of where and how you want to experience the terror.